That fear I had of being trapped in a small provincial town goes back perhaps to my father, who spent a very unhappy childhood growing up under the patronage of an English Protestant landowner in the little country village of Enniskerry. My father, in the great Irish tradition, resented authority. And the kind of authority that he had to endure, and most people had to endure in Enniskerry in the 1900s, was the authority of Lord Powerscourt, who not only owned all the land, but actually, in the tradition of those English lords, owned the people as well. The village of Enniskerry was built to house the servants and workers of the nearby Powerscourt estate. Now, I've come back to my father's birthplace to meet a relation of mine, Una Wogan, a second cousin, and she's traced the Wogan clan as far back as they go in this village.
So if you just look at one...
And you've got the pictures.
I have
the pictures of my antecedents.
We have a picture of your grandfather and grandmother.
Look at that.
So that's Michael, and he married a Sarah McRoe. She was from Fermanagh. So that's who your father was very fond of his mother, I heard.
He was.
Yes.
My father didn't like his father much.
By all accounts, his father wasn't a very pleasant man.
Well, my father was a really nice man.
Yeah, yeah.
And but he didn't have a moustache like that. But I can see the resemblance. My father left Enniskerry and his home and family as soon as he could. 15. Couldn't bear having to kowtow and doff his cap to Powerscourt's local dignitaries. Now it seems Una has discovered a previous generation of Wogans in Enniskerry going way back into the 19th century. A man that would be my great-grandfather.
The very first Wogan to come to the village was Michael Wogan.
Yeah.
He came from Dublin City and he married an Eliza Kelly, who was from the village. And then they went on to have 11 children.
They didn't fool around in those days, did they?
No.
And what did he do for a living?
He was a bootmaker, a master bootmaker.
Young Una here claims to have tracked down a photograph of the great Wogan ancestor hanging on a wall in a pub. That's a surprise. This I must see. So this is the old pub here.
This is the old pub.
Yeah.
So if you look at this
And what's
photograph,
this?
This is your great-grandfather, Michael.
Of course, I'm a Michael.
You're a Michael.
Yeah,
so
I'm a Michael Terence.
You're in...
And my mother called me Terry because my father was Michael Thomas.
Right.
So just to distinguish between us, instead of shouting Michael and nobody knowing who's been called, she called me Terry. And that's another Michael. Look at the herbaceous border. Don't tell me there's more.
Well, this is him sitting down.
It's extraordinary. Where was this taken?
Powerscourt House on the south, so he was 75 in this.
But is that Lord Powerscourt there?
That's him, yeah.
He sitting there in what could only be described as a fairly seigneurial position.
This is it. And they were all at attention, really.
And this is Powerscourt today, over a century after my great-grandfather toiled over making the boots and shoes of the people that served and worked here. It's been transformed from Lord Powerscourt's stately home to one of Ireland's most popular tourist destinations, but the reminders of the old hierarchies are still here. These steps look strangely bare, don't they, after those photographs of the pub? So how does one man get all this? Well, his ancestor was a very successful soldier. Wingfield was his name. And so he was rewarded by being Marshal of Ireland. Given this huge parcel of land, he built this modest little place behind it. Not him, the unfortunate Irish peasantry built this little place behind. And then these magnificent Italianate gardens. For 20 years, hundreds of local Irish labourers slaved over the creation of these fabulous gardens. And inside the house, great teams of butlers and cooks and tweenies and housemaids and footmen would have been put to service running and maintaining this vast residence for the comfort and pleasure of its wealthy owners. You know, the good Lord and Lady Powerscourt, they didn't get where they are, or were, by not thinking of everything. This sunken road was specially designed by them, so they didn't have to see the rough peasantry and their servants making their way to the fields and the house. And the only reason you can see me is I'm taller than the average peasant of those times, I like to think. Powerscourt was built by the people of Enniskerry. And indeed, they relied on this place for their living. They still do. Enniskerry relies on Powerscourt and its tourism to this day. No, at one time, Ireland was full of little fiefdoms like Powerscourt. English and Scottish settlers seized much of the country's best land. The native Catholics became tenants in their own country. During the 1840s, the country experienced a crippling famine. 1 million people died of starvation. Even before the famine, thousands of people eked out an existence, growing their crops among the stony hills and valleys of the Wicklow Mountains. On family drives over here over the weekends in the 1950s, we'd marvel at the beauty of Sugarloaf Mountain. But coming from the poverty-ridden countryside as he did, my dad would always remind us, you can't eat the scenery. During the Great Famine, over 1 million people emigrated rather than starved to death. And the austere conditions in Ireland meant people continued to emigrate in large numbers, right up until the 1960s. They left without knowing what they were going to. They left because they were desperate. They left because they were starving. They left because there was no work. And their last view of their native land was Cove.